Well, gentlemen, we have a guest. This is Glenn Garvin.
Yeah.
All right. I like the intensity.
Yeah, that's it.
We've asked him to come in and talk with us a little bit about specifically maturity, but unspecifically just being men. So what does actual physical manly maturity look like? What does spiritual maturity look like? How does that potentially tie into like spiritual formation, like Trevor was talking about last week? But he is a trusted ally and a beloved brother in the faith. Glenn, if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about who you are, where you come from.
Absolutely. Your introduction sounds so biblical. I feel like I'm just listening to one of the apostles. Right? Trusted ally, and that's good stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm a local boy. Born and raised in Long Beach, California. So not all that far from. And I think for context sake, you need to know these guys. The three of them already heard this story, but for context sake, you need to know my family was really, really difficult. So I've had two mothers and I've had three fathers, and they're now all dead. But never met my birth mother. I was adopted early on, 4 years old. Put into a house with now we're talking about a secondary family unit. So put into the house, my birth father and my birth grandfather, it got to a point where they could not raise me, and so I got adopted at 4 years old, and that family already had a young girl. She was probably about 10 in the family. They were on their second marriage, and then the dad wanted a son, and they thought the quickest way is this adoption process, and so I get adopted. So I get in this family, and I don't know really anything that's going on because I'm just too young. I remember clearly, going to school, getting called out of school, getting called into a lawyer's office, swearing in with my parents. I'm swearing in they're swearing in. And I remember that, so I'm adopted, and it didn't take long to realize, like, man, this brand new family of mine, it's got problems. So my adopted father, he was an alcoholic. He had major drinking problems. I find out like later, this was one of the tactics I believe women use to try to straighten out guys' lives. Like, let's get a kid in here. Oh my gosh! Like, really? That's a bad.
This was your decision.
It's a bad tactic. Like, let's get a boy in here. I mean, talking about father issues, right? Let's get a boy in here. This boy will straighten out this man, my dad. Crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
I find that out years later. But anyway, so drinking got really, really crazy, and it got just all kinds of stories. When my dad was sober, he's just the nicest guy ever. He worked for McDonnell Douglas, and he was just a great guy. But he was not sober very often, and so when he was drunk, he was violent, mostly towards my mother and her daughter, which would be his oldest stepdaughter. Whew, it was bad, and so here I am growing up in that context. And anyways, just all that stuff happened. Divorced. They ended up divorcing. My adopted mom ends up like really running for our lives. They had another baby in the family, so they had a natural baby between my adopted dad and my adopted mom. And there was a little bit of thought like, well, this will obviously help him. He'll have his own blood child, and it's we won't get into it, but it's a daughter. Like, you got to be careful when you raise a daughter, and that's what they thought, and it just didn't help, So he ends up committing suicide. He takes his own life. I'm 12 years old at this point. He shoots himself, and it's just horrible. So, and that's my background. My mom ends up marrying another guy. She met him in a bar. she told me and my little sister, hey, Ben, his name is Ben, we're going to Vegas. And I remember as a teenager, like, I know what that means. Isn't that wild? Like, I don't know if your parents or anybody's like, hey, we're going to Vegas. I don't know if any of you think, oh, you're going to get married. That's exactly what I knew was happening. So I pick up this awful stepfather. I call him Psychopath Ben because he was just a very, very, very bad dude. He was just all kinds of anger issues and all that stuff. So it's in that milieu, it's in that context that I'm growing up, right? And so I am, I'm just a mess, making through life and all that stuff, but still, I'm just a mess. In and out. I wasn't raised in church, but my mother would sometimes send me off to one of the local churches in Long Beach. That was fantastic. They were very nice to me. My sister, when I say this, I'm not meaning to be offensive, but she got Jesus, and then she turned into a Jesus freak. So she turned into this really loud Pentecostal Jesus freak. And I say that because one night my dad was really drunk, and my older sister had enough, and they pretty much hate each other. And Dad's drunk, and they have it out in this tiny little hallway of our home. And I'm in my bedroom right off the hallway. And all I hear is my sister Peggy screaming at the top of, come out in the name of Jesus. And I hear my dad just cussing her out. I mean, he's talking to his daughter, but it's like, and I am just like, no. And my sister's just going, have you heard this story?
No.
She is just going. And, part of me is like, Peggy, shut up.
Yeah.
Please. And then the other part of me is like, well, you never know. Maybe that. And she's just, and my mom is coming in from this direction, and she's screaming at both of them. She's telling my sister to be quiet. She's telling my dad to sleep it off. And I just remember it gets really, really loud, and they're just yelling at each other. And then all of a sudden, my dad just passes out right in the hallway. And my sister's like, praise Jesus! Hallelujah! She's like having this crazy like Jesus moment. And I'm not a Christian, but I'm just like, oh, that was wild. Go God. It's in this context. This is my framework of trying to figure out. So all of that to say, by the time I end up, my mom wants me to go to church. I end up going to church, and then she talks me into going to a Christian camp with this church. And I said, Mom, I don't want to go to Christian camp. They're going to brainwash me. They're going to fill me with a bunch of starchy foods, and they're going to just make me say things, and I won't want to say them, but they'll make me say them. That's not what happened. But I go to the Christian camp, and I'm with a bunch of probably 40 teenagers, and this is in the 70s, so it's a tail end of the Jesus movement. I don't know if you got to see the Jesus Revolution, but like this is the context of what was going on. I had no idea what was happening, but I'm at this retreat, and I'm with all these teenagers, and they're just normal and natural, just raising their hands, they're worshiping God, and I'm just looking at them. I'm in the back of this little lodge area, and I'm just like, what's going on? This is, nobody's making them do this, and this is wild. But I did that Friday night, and then Saturday just had blast with the church and all that. All these guys, just a lot of guys in the youth group. So they were just so fun. They were nice, and I was just having a blast. Saturday night, same thing. They do this worship service, and it's at this point where I'm watching them, and I'm like, man, something's very right about what I'm seeing here, but something's very wrong in my life. So I find a spot in the lodge. I get under this table, and I'm just kind of contemplating, like, man, my life is a mess, And I only knew one thing, and I say that in context of maturity. Believe it or not, this has got a point. But I say this one thing in my head. It's like, if I just did the opposite of my parents, maybe I'll turn out right. Mm-hmm. I just wanted something drastically to change so that I would not be. Because I felt like I had a curse on me. My family, that family, but also my actual birth family's got a lot of issues, like cycled back a few generations. Actually, my family goes all the way back to Hatfields and McCoys.
Wow.
So it's like, yeah, they do, from my grandfather's side. And I'm like, anyways, I didn't know that then. I'm just like, and in this moment, this voice comes out of nowhere. And when I say voice, it's because I felt like I could hear it, but obviously I did not hear it with my ears, but this voice is in my head. And the voice says, if you give me your life, I will be your dad. And I'm like, what? And I felt God like I'd never had even experienced God. And it's just, that moment was powerful. And I'm arguing with this voice. It's like, man, I'm not worth this. I don't know. And just calmly, give me your life. I'll be your dad. And I just broke. I started crying, and I just said yes. I just said yes. So that's my context. But I want to tell you, from that point forward, I thought definitely it was like a religious experience. Like, okay, that was cool. It was very cool. But the next day, Sunday, Monday was a 4-day weekend, 3-day weekend. I go back to school on Tuesday. I'm a junior in high school. And I'm like, it's going to go back to normal. And I wake up Sunday and it didn't go back to normal. And I was feeling what you hear. If you hear stories about, I felt different. You'll hear stories from people that were not believers and then they became believers. You'll hear them like, I felt lighter. Mm-hmm. That's the wild. Like, yeah. I did. I felt lighter. I felt clean. That's wild too. Like, how do you can't feel clean, but I did. I felt clean. And so Monday, but here's what I want to let you know. I did not get much from my birth dad at all. There's a longer story there, but I did not get much from my adopted dad. And I got 0 from Psychopath Ben. So I got these three dads, and they really did not give me anything to go on. I was going to tell you a bunch of stories, like maybe I learned my adopted dad. I remember one time somehow I shook his hand. He's like, that's not how you shake hands. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And so he's like, no, you grip a man's hand and you mean it. And I'm like, well, what did I do? And he's like, you don't shake a man's hand like this. And I'm like, oh, the dead fish. Yeah. Yeah. And I was like so excited that I got something from my dad, Anyways, they're wearing a lot of things. And so I carry that in, and then here's where I want to kind of take this before we open up just discussion or whatever. It just, I didn't understand. I thought it was a religious experience and it stuck. And then I wake up on Tuesday and immediately, what happens is I just thought it was a great thing that God said he would be my dad. I never expected that he was serious. I did not even understand that he was serious. And so being a dad, I now know some of the things that I want my kids to learn that I did not learn. This is one of the first things that God taught me because I knew nothing. I just knew nothing. God had to teach me obedience. Obedience, even as a child, the boundaries of what is good and healthy. I mean, Levi, come on, you know this, but you've got to establish these boundaries because kids, they don't have them. They touch things they shouldn't. They eat things they shouldn't. They do things and you're like, no, son, no, daughter, that's not safe. No, right? No. Now parents say, no, thank you, whatever. I'm like, whatever. I'm not, anyways. I had to learn obedience, and it was so hard for me to learn obedience from God because God would speak to me, and I'll talk about that, but mostly through like his word because I started reading more of the Bible, but also this voice of God, this like, here's what I want you to do. You may have heard this story. I was a thief and a liar when I was a kid, and I had actually lived in an apartment building, and it's very, very sad now, but there was a single mom down below with her young son, And she trusted me, so I cleaned house and did some stuff, and she paid me for a few of those things. And so I ended up breaking into her back window and stealing her stereo system, just because I wanted to. I knew I couldn't come in the front door with the key, because that's obvious that Glenn stole the stereo system. So I broke in through her back window, and I stole the stereo. And I knew my mom wouldn't let me bring this thing in, so I took the thing apart. I found a weird tin can, and I put the guts of the stereo in this can. And then my mom comes in, she's like, "What's that?" It's like, "Oh, I found this in the trash." And it looked like trash. And she's like, "Oh, okay." But I'm listening to this stereo. And when I accepted Christ, the teenagers told me about a brand new radio station. It was down here. It was called KYMS. It was 106.3. And I remember they told me the Christian radio, and I'm like, "What?" Yeah, Christian radio. And I didn't even have an understanding what that means. Like, what are you talking about? They make music for Christians? Like, what? And they're like, "Yeah, where have you been?" And it's like, "That's impossible. Like, what's that sound like? Like hymns? I mean, what?" And they're like, "No, you don't know." And I'm like, "No." So they said, "You got to listen to KYMS. You got to listen to this Christian radio station." I'm in my bed. I'm listening to KYMS. And out of this voice comes and says, "What do you think you're doing?" And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And God just repeats, saying, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm listening to the radio." And this is a dialogue. I know it's freaky, but I'm like, "Yeah, I'm listening to the radio." And then God's like, "And?" I'm like, "Well, what's the and? I don't get it." "And I'm listening to the radio." And then it hits me. "Oh, I'm listening to Christian music on a stolen radio system." Right? Yeah. I'm laying there like, "Oh, and that's not cool, right?" And God's like, "No, that's not." And so I'm like, "Okay, I'll get rid of it." And God said, "No, you're not going to get rid of it. You're going to go down. You're going to tell her what you did. You're going to pay for it. You're going to confront that whole thing." And I'm like, "No, I'm not."
Glenn who?
And God's like, "Yes, you are." I won't keep going on the story, but basically, I learned that you obey God or he quits talking. You obey God or he quits talking. I think there's a lot of believers, like, you see it in the Word, and you're like, "That's what the Bible says," and God's like, "Yeah, obey it," and you're like, "No, I don't think so." And there you gotta hear the other side of that. It's like, well, why would I speak to you? Why would I show you anything? You're not gonna. But I don't want to do that. Well, then I'm not going to show you anything. And God he just didn't talk for a few days, and it became very miserable. And so I did it. I went down and I had the money, and I just knocked on the door, and it was horrible. I mean, I felt sick, and she slammed the door in my face. She didn't take the money. And I'm like, "Are you happy, God? I mean, is this what you wanted?" He wanted obedience. God wanted obedience. For me, I had to learn maturity through the first step of obedience. It was powerful. Discipline followed. That's the other one, discipline. I had to learn the methods and the things with God, but also this really, really difficult area of just like how to interact with people. I was just horrible with people. I just didn't know. I was just kind of a social outcast, and I was quiet. It was weird. And anyways, I had to learn those things from God. And then I'll drop the third one, and then I'll quit. So when I start figuring out the rhythm, get this rhythm. God's teaching me like a dad should teach their children. Right? I'm picking up. It's like, "Oh, you were serious about this. If you give me your life, I'll be your dad." Right? And I was learning, but I got to a point where it's like, wait a second. So hang with me here. If my car breaks down and I don't know how to fix it, I can ask you for help. Now that sounds crazy if you didn't have my experience. And God was like, yeah. And I'm like, okay. I have had more miracles by that. Story after story. Buying a house, getting married. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, God. I don't know what I'm doing. Ask me. I don't know how to fix a transmission. Okay, I'll help you. I don't know how to make this, I don't know how to approach this pastor's daughter, this girl that I like. Okay, ask me. I don't know how to, and I just have a list of things. Because if I'm thinking about you guys right here, I was so angry and envious that you could go to Phil and you're like, Dad, I've got some things I need to, help me. And Phil's like, waiting for the day for you to do this. So I was mad because I don't have it. God's like, but ask me. So, that was it. The only thing in all of that, I learned for 2 years of my life. So this would be from 15 all the way through 17. I read a chapter out of Proverbs every day because there's 31, and so I just 2 years in a row, every day, read the same. You just 1 and 2 all the way to 31, and then start over again. And I've heard people say this about Proverbs. When you read that book like that, I've heard people say this. It felt like the things that I faced during the day were like right out of Proverbs. And so there were conflict or there were issues, and here's wisdom. So obedience, discipline, and wisdom. And Tim Keller says this. He believes Proverbs was probably a curriculum package for young Jewish men. That's why it's shaped for, the Proverbs 7 or 8, the wicked woman. It's like, that makes sense. Like, the woman. Anyways, you know what I'm talking about. So, anyways, and I had to depend on God. I had to depend on God. Okay, that's probably enough to get you to where, like, feedback or questions or thoughts about it, because I had nothing, Phil. We were talking about this at dinner, but nothing. I didn't have anything to hang on. I didn't have any idea how to get to be a man, or how to be a boyfriend, and then eventually a husband. And as you start upping the stakes and you get to that part where you're not just a husband, then you become a father, I was scared to death. I was scared to death. So I didn't have the same excitement. I was like terrified. And then our firstborn is a son. We have 2 boys and a girl. So that's my route. That's my story.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing.
Yes.
That's an incredibly vulnerable story. So I come from a place of, I didn't have a good father figure growing up. I didn't have somebody to, teach me these different skills in life. It didn't teach me any sort of spiritual maturity by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
How do you go from 0 to just being able to completely trust in God, come what may? Like, how do you bridge that gap?
Well, let me read into your question a little bit. The younger you are, the easier it is. So when you're 15 years old, you're an idiot.
That's true.
Accurate.
You don't even start, I don't know where you guys are at, but you really don't start maturing until you're 25. 25 is about the time that we're like, what? What's going on? So it was easier on me because I had no reputation. I didn't have any or a lot of friends. I mean, there were some bonuses to being 15 years old. So I'm giving that as the backstory. But how did I get? So
I'm assuming it wasn't just like overnight. Like, yeah, I'm able to trust God with everything. That's not certainly the route I've taken.
Not at all. But here's the thing. I had two things, and in fact, when I was praying about it, thinking about it. That's a great question, because it's like, why? I had a hunger to try to not. This is the negative. I don't want to end up like my dad's.
Mm-hmm.
Neither of them. All of them. So I had a kind of a negative thing. Like, I do not want to end up to be like them. But then the positive one is I want to do something right with my life. Mm-hmm. That was a drive for me. And so that's an internal drive. No matter what your origin story is, you've probably got some things back there. You've either like, I don't want to ever be like this, mm-hmm. but I kind of want to be like this. And that's what was driving me. But the other thing is, when I was asking God and I could tell he was leading and guiding me, mm-hmm. Things went well. Now, I'm not supposed to say this because I'm not quite sure how it is theologically, but when I didn't obey, things went really crappy.
That's accurate.
And I had people telling me, don't blame that on God. He didn't do it. And I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure he did. Now, I don't know where that fits. Like I said, that's bad theology, but when I was that age, I was like, when I'm obedient, things tend to go well. Things can go wrong even when you're obedient. You guys know this, but I didn't know that. So I'm being obedient. Things seem to go. When I'm not, things did not go well. So that caused me to race back and repent and go like, hey, man, I messed up, and help me get back on track. So that's where this trust. Yeah, I just told you all the the cool things of being a dad. I didn't talk about the spiritual things that were happening. When God said, go and talk to Colin about this, and he would share with me, like, you need to pray for him, you need to talk. I did it. So I had almost zero hesitation when I was a teenager. Mm-hmm. God said to do it, and I did it. So that's because it was, like you said, it was learning to trust.
Born of repetition.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And as we get older, that gets harder and harder to do. Mm-hmm. Because you start dragging along with you reputation, position, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. whatever.
Possessions.
Yeah. People. Yep. And all of a sudden, God's like, here's what I want you to do. And you're like, nope. Not going to do that. But anyways, great question though.
Yeah. How did you come to a point, Glenn, where you started trusting like men to speak into your life?
That was harder. Yeah.
That was
very hard. Yeah, I have. Remember, I do have some men that speak into my life, right? And it was hard because I've gotten over it, but the 5 men that I looked up to, they all at one point or another said, you're not going to make it.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Big vote of confidence.
Yeah. My original youth pastor, don't go to, it was SCC back in the day, Vanguard, you know.
Yeah.
Don't, he just told me flat out, don't go to, that's a waste of money. I'm like, oh, thanks. Okay. Yeah. Second youth pastor, you're not cut out for this. You pick something else. So that's second. Third, fourth, fifth, yeah. Guys that I looked up to, you know, you're not cut out for this. You're not going to make it. Mm-hmm. So I had to plow through that, because I'm like, who do I trust? Do I trust these men that I see and like and love, and they are amazing to me and I get it, but do I trust them or do I trust God? So yeah. So when did I? God sent me, they were all older men, they were all pretty much grandpa-like men. And I just, I would just hang out with them. Church guys. And when you go to a church and you don't have what you guys have experienced in terms of just a good, solid family life and a solid life with Jesus, you don't have that. You really get a second sense of who's just playing games and who's messing around, and you really get a sense of who's really spiritual.
Mhm.
So I was drawn to people that nobody ever thought they were spiritual, but I knew they were. And they were the ones teaching me crafts things, you know, like fixing things and doing and spiritual things and humility and all these things. These were much, much older men. I mean, I thought, you know, they were probably 40, Phil. I thought they were going to die. They were probably, anyways.
Old age, they drop dead
Their old age,
any
yeah.
second.
Yeah. I had that one, and Kyle may know the story because just roundabout ways, but I had this guy that lived down the street that he helped me fix my bike, and he spoke into my life one time. He helped me fix my bike, and then he said this to me. He said, "You do that well." And it's like, wow, this Stan guy thinks I did this really well, and I just never forgot that. So when you encourage a child, boy or girl, an adult encourages a child, it's just powerful. When you do that in a teenager, they may not look like it affects them, but they really take it, because there's not a lot of people coming along and going, "You're doing good. Keep going. I see it. I believe you. I believe in you." There's not a lot of people who do that. So man, I was hungry for that. So yeah, good question.
You talked about hearing God, you were able to listen to a lot of his guidance.
Yeah.
How were you able to distinguish that between the flesh and just what your own personal desires were?
That's a awesome question. Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah. I had to find out the hard way, because again, now I'm on staff. I was on staff at a church, and you guys, you're leading a group, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was leading a small group, and we got into this discussion, the voice of God, and everybody in the group's like, God doesn't speak to me that way. And I realized, oh man, that's not the way it works with everybody, because it's all very individual. So that's a great question. It takes a long time. I'll tell you the ones that you want to hear, right? God will never speak to you to do something that violates His word, ever.
Amen.
So I'm not jumping off a roof or a cliff. Well, not that I wouldn't, but I'm not going to say God told me to do this.
Yeah.
I'm not. That's not gonna. It doesn't work. That's my first rung. I go through a second rung because I just had to do something God asked me to do, and I didn't want to do it. It was just 2 weeks ago, and I wrestled with it. And I have to go through a process. One of my big indicators is I don't want to do this. Like, I'm telling you straight out, this I'm inside. There's a story in the Bible. I'll tell you in a second. I'm the guy that's like, I'm not going to do it. And it takes me some time to settle with it. The story goes like this. Jesus said there's two sons. One son, the father says, I want you to do it. He says, I'll go do it. But he goes out and he doesn't do it. And he goes to the second son. He's like, son, I want you to do it. And he says, I'm not going to do it. But that son ends up doing it. And Jesus says, which one obeyed? Whew.
Yeah.
I'm the second one. I'm like, I'm not good. So that's a filter for me. Like, I don't want to do this. It passed this test, the Bible test, but I don't want to do it. That's a test for me. Then I'll tell you the third one that's much, much harder. If I'm not willing, well, God says, I want you to do something. Now I'm talking about what works with me is, I'm supposed to say something to, Kevin. Sorry, Kevin?
Yeah.
I'm supposed to say something to Kevin. And I'm like, I'm not going to, he's just going to think I'm just a whack here. I'm not going to do it. I go through this. What happens is I go through one more filter. And I said, if this is not out of pure love for Kevin, and I'm not willing to go the distance with you on what I'm going to say to you, I won't do it. Like, I'm not going to give some kind of cheap shot, and then it's like, well, that's up to you, brother. I'm not going to do it. So if I can't invest deeply and stick to what I'm trying to say, I'll say, not you. I don't love him enough. I don't love him enough to do that, because it may cause it may cause problems. And so that's my filters.
Right.
And they're hard.
Yeah.
They're hard.
Yeah.
So even when you've got some clear, because not everybody hears the voice of God, but there's a lot. There's things that when you read, they lift,
Oh yeah.
and they hit, and then you feel the Holy Spirit going, that's for you.
That's you. Yep.
Yeah.
But in those moments, there could be things you're like, that's for somebody and you need to share that. That's the simple thing. It's like, hey, I was reading this, I was thinking about you. Maybe you should read this. That's the simple. So those are the mine.
Well,
I would even piggyback off that. We were talking about John Piper at dinner, and he's one of my dudes that I like. I don't agree with everything he says, but I think he has a lot of good things to say. And he says, one of my favorite quotes is, if you want to hear God, the voice of God, read your Bible. If you want to hear the voice of God out loud, read your Bible out loud.
Yeah.
very powerful.
Yeah, that's good.
Anyone else?
You basically took my question. I have the benefit of having sat with you through many, many conversations, and I have been the recipient of some of the conversations that you just talked about, where you have come to me and said, "Hey, here's something I see, and I'm not willing to let you get by with it,
Wow.
but I'm also not willing to drop you either." And you challenged me tonight because I can be the kind of person that can confront someone very easily. I don't enjoy it, but I am good at it. And saying, hey, here's the problem, and here's what you need to do to fix it. But am I willing to disciple? Am I willing to walk with them from point A to point B, to the desired destination that I feel the Holy Spirit has pointed them to? And I really think that that's something that's missing in our church, but I think in the church as a whole. And I don't think that's just exclusive to Legacy. I think that's something that we all need to work on.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Yeah. I wrote down, I know you have other men who have spoken into your life. What role have they played in sharpening your obedience, discipline, and wisdom? Not just the excitement of hearing a man say you're good at this, but
yeah, I think three out of the five. I think they started realizing they knew me well enough to poke at the things that just irritated me. I just couldn't stand. Like, this literally is what this is what the body of Christ is for, not just encouragement. I'm just going to keep encouraging Kevin. But that's the one part of it. But the reason Proverbs has that iron sharpens iron, and in that discussion of men, really, is because those areas of conflict and those areas of massive disagreement, if we will work through those things, on the other end is a sharper man. But we don't, because you hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so these three men didn't let me get away with you hurt my feelings. Wayne being one of the bigger ones, like, you hurt my feelings. Like, okay, well, you needed to hear it, but yeah, it was really, when you let guys get into your life and they get close enough to you, they don't have any problem complimenting you really or encouraging you, because they see your strengths that are different than their own, but they do see your faults, weaknesses, and areas that are glaringly out of line. These are the kind of things that happen they're most helpful in relationships. So let's say it is with a girl, and they notice something and they speak into your life, maybe similar to that night, but it's like, hey, you're worth too much to me, I'm going to say this, and as you get to marriage and all these things, it just becomes even more intense. Like, you have friends that are willing to say, hey, I noticed how you talked about Robin, my wife, and not cool. Like, oh my gosh, really? so we're in the context of maturity, right? This is how we grow. I mean, this is how men grow. We not only push forward with God and let God get us to the place that He knows and wants us to be. Ephesians 4:15, Paul says we all need to grow up into maturity of Christ, you know. But also, this is the benefit of having men around you to do the same thing. So, yeah, they found the things that irritated me. It's the short answer to your question. So, do you have friends that are willing to be that to you? You know, because otherwise, come on. Otherwise, you have zero self-awareness, man. You're just like floating around. You're just floating around in your own world where everybody's just kissing your butt, saying you're just a great guy, and you're like, I have a feeling somebody's not being honest with me. Your friends are honest, both with the good and with the real. I wouldn't even say, you know. Anyways, they're good at both. All right. Yeah.
How did okay? You had poor examples of dads and moms.
Yeah.
Okay, into young adult life. What were some of the things that happened or that you did that brought you into the mature world that you are in now?
Well, that is really good. That's really good. I already told you I had one big issue that I'm using it in in a good context, but I had this fantasy that every father-son relationship was good. Oh my gosh.
Was that because that's what you wanted?
Yeah, but I mean, I didn't know. So if I had hung around you as a kid, even my good friends, you know, I'm like, well, you got a dad. It must be good.
Yeah.
You know, Phil, I don't think I woke up to that reality until maybe my mid-30s. Like, wait a second. You have a father and you don't like him? Like, I'm going to kill you now.
Wow.
What is this?
Kill you now.
I'm the weirdest guy ever. One of my best friends, I told him at his father's funeral, I wish I had this experience. Because he loved his dad. And he grieved when his dad died. I didn't love my dads, and I did not grieve their death. And I told my best friend, I'm jealous. And he's like, you're a weirdo. But in my context, yeah. So, that's one thing. I didn't see things correct. The other thing I didn't see correct is I thought that everybody else's life seemed to have a really good track where they're like, obviously they know what they're doing, and there's somebody helping them, and they're telling them, hey, your next step is just do this, and next step is that, and you know. And I mean, I had to learn the hard way. It's like, that's not true either. Not everybody has parents or family or whatever around them. It's like, do you need any help? Are you okay? What's going on? I don't know what my next step is. You know, I didn't know exactly why I was going to SCC. You know, I was either going to go to Long Beach State, and my dad, Corky, my adopted dad, he was an electrician. I liked the field. I liked working with my hands. I wanted to be an electrician. It was God's fault that I didn't become an electrician. And I'm not happy about it. I'm still not happy about it. You can fix stuff. You cannot fix people. So I'm not happy about it. But be that as it may, I was going to go, and this comes up, and again, I asked God, what do you want me to do? And he's like, I want you to go to this Christian college. Okay. I go to the Christian college. You go through 4 years. All along, I'm like, well, I'm in a track. That's really a good thing. I'm on it, you know. But everybody knows, well, it used to be, I'm in my senior year, and there's like,
what's next?
What do I do now? You know, what do I do now? And Robin and I got married in our senior year. So I don't want to be mean. So I was 21 years old, but I don't want to be mean or anything. It's like, now I got this woman. Like,
This woman you gave me.
yeah, what am I supposed to do?
Wow.
And she thinks I either know what I'm doing or I'm supposed to know what I'm doing. And you're supposed to know what you're doing because you're the church girl. You're the PK. You should know how this works. And she didn't know what she was doing. But it was very... How'd I do it? It was a lot of fear, and it was a lot of looking for open door opportunities where God would direct. I had some funky ways of trying to determine, God, is this you or not? I mean, it was hard. It was hard. I now know, looking back, asking the question is one thing. What am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to make a decision. Which way should I go? What should I do? That's one thing. But there's this sense of when, like, there were several options that opened up, right? And there's a sense like, let's take the option where we have this sense of peace.
Yeah.
Like, God's like, you have a sense of peace.
Mm-hmm.
So we took it.
Mm-hmm.
I took it. And that's the way it went when I was, we were 20 years old, 21, 22, just being led by a sense of peace and a sense of God opened the doors, and we'll decide, so should we walk through it?
Mm-hmm.
What,
There's an old proverb, well, it's not an old proverb, it's the same proverb, 16:9. Man plans his steps, God directs his path, and it's like, wait, what's going on? How's this make sense?
Mm-hmm.
How do we make plans,
Mm.
and how does God direct that? It seems like we lift our foot because we're going to put it here, and somehow just before it lands, God makes sure it goes over here. And you're like, oh, okay. He's all for plans, but you don't know how he's going to direct them.
Yeah.
So-
The Bible also says like the heart of man is like streams in his hand, and he directs them where he wants them to go.
Oh, okay.
A question that I had, just gathering from bits and pieces of your story, is you somehow had a lot of tenacity and grit
Mm.
to be able to stick with something even when you didn't necessarily want to.
Mm-hmm.
Where did that grit come from? And how do you cultivate whatever little grit you may have now into something much more in the future?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. It sounds like a compliment, but I'm really stubborn. And then when we did,
But you've leveraged it.
I guess so. But I did a master's degree, and then I realized, wow, master's degrees, or I don't know where you guys are at, probably PhDs. It's not about intelligence. It's about grit.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
about perseverance. So people think it has to do with intelligence.
Great.
And it's like, not really. You know how many people quit their master's degrees, leaving maybe 1 credit or 3 credits hanging on the,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like 80%, leave it. Most PhDs never finish.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very rare thing for PhDs to go through and get your doctorate
Yeah.
Mm.
because of
Grit.
grit, perseverance. So, I don't know. I was just thinking about this today. It's funny you said that. Like I don't like. I want to know how my story is supposed to end.
Mm.
I'm curious.
Yeah.
So I don't want to exit. I don't want to throttle back or take my foot off the gas. I want to know how it ends. I'm so curious as to what God could possibly do in my life out of the wreck that I came from. Maybe that's grit.
Yeah.
Kyle told you I got fired in 2018, didn't he? I got fired from church. That was a fun thing.
What a blessing.
It was. It was like, wow. To get fired. That's what threw me into you guys.
I haven't shared that story with anybody, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We had long talks. Like, you think I want to go back into this? I mean, I couldn't talk you out of it, but I was like, are you sure you want to do this? Because I used to, I mean, I the church world and all that, but it's like, man, people are,
They're rough.
we're a rough crowd, man.
Mhm.
Can't
We're
live with
a
them,
rough
can't kill
crowd,
them.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, I don't know. I'm not, that's the fun thing too. I'm not trying to, I mean, I think inside there's some of it that I want Robin, my wife, to be proud.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I want my adult kids to be proud. That's probably in there. Like,
So
I'm
like
not going
a realization that more is on the line than just there's something else beyond. Like, even like when you're like for us guys, like even though we're single, there's still people in situations that depend on us, and realizing that we have social roles to fill, we have spiritual roles to fill. I would love to see the collective church do more to teach us young men how to leverage us being single and how can we make an impact. But I'm sure even more so than just being single and having these minor situations compared to what marriage and having a family and kids depend on you. But leveraging like, hey, I have these obligations on me. I need to bite into that and be a man. So how did you get there?
Well, I don't want to, I care about you, so I don't want to offend you. Paul says that being single is the most amazing freedom you'll ever have in your life if you decide to be married, or if you don't, then all of a sudden it flips into a very nasty scenario where you had more freedom than most individuals, and the whole question starts into this: what did you do with it? That's a much bigger weight to carry than dragging a wife or dragging children. Is a lot of freedom to whatever, make an impact, make money, and make that work, or whatever it is. You have more time, you have more freedom, and it's not like God's like, oh, I want it all, but there's a significantly amount more than a married person. And Paul says, what are you leveraging that? And you could do that anywhere, anytime, simply by saying, God, I'm in a unique position right now in my life, especially if I'm not woman hunting. And I have two things to say about that, because we did young adults and singles for a while. The sexiest thing you'll ever find is a person that is pursuing what they want to be. That's sexy to a woman. So, and then I tell the gals the same thing on the other end. Like, live your life, and that will be an attractive thing for a guy to try to catch up with you. But I don't know. I don't remember what your question was, but yeah.
Yeah.
You've got. I mean, there's a lot of things that need to be done. A lot of things. There's just a lot of things that need to be done in the church, outside the church, definitely.
Glenn, how long have you been married?
40. We just hit 40 last.
Wow.
Yeah.
Woo!
Last year, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You're married, correct?
No, I'm not.
Oh, you're
My
not.
brother is.
Your brother is
Yeah.
married. Okay.
He's married and a 4-year-old.
And a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I thought you said something else for a second.
That's it. I did. I
I heard married a 4-year-old. And I was
I
Oh,
like,
no, I'm married
what?
with a 4-year-old.
translated it.
Yeah, I know. Imagine that. Wow.
Joseph Smith.
Okay, so
Yeah.
obviously Kyle's married, and all these guys are basically coming to that marriage age.
Okay.
Okay, in your frame of mind,
Mhm.
with your history,
Mm.
with your do you call them dads or fathers or
Either one. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
not being a good role model?
Right. Right.
And you married a pastor's
That's right.
daughter.
Yeah.
That meant he was a pastor. What role did he play
Well, that's a good
in
question.
That is
your
a great
life?
question.
He did, you know, thankfully I got close to Frank, Robin's dad. I got close to him before I really had any intentions for her. I mean, that's partially true, not, I know, that didn't come out right. I didn't know who she was, and I didn't know who her dad was. So I had a relationship with the pastor, but I didn't have a relationship with Robin's dad because I didn't know they were the same person.
You're wanting to say.
Oh wow.
That's funny.
Yeah. So
So,
that
and
was,
how old were you at that time?
well, I didn't know I didn't know that Christian girls weren't allowed to date. So as soon as I meet her, I'm trying to date her at 15 and a half years old. And I'm getting all these like, no, we don't do that. It's like, why?
not?
You know.
Yeah.
And then I got the bar dropped. It's like, no, we have a minimum here. You know, the girl has to be 16. And so it's like, oh, okay, I'll wait. You know, but she didn't date me at 16. That's a whole nother story. So I didn't get to. I started dating her at 17. But you know, I was just scared to death. You know, and what's happening though is like, I mean, I'm just crazy about her, and I love her, right? But I don't really have an idea of where that's going to lead. I mean, I know what I'm not supposed to do, right? I'm not supposed to do a lot of things. I'm not supposed to have sex with her. You know, I'm not supposed to put her in any compromising, you know, positions where I could. There used to be a phrase for it, you know, sully her reputation. That goes back to the car being parked in front of the house. I'm not supposed to. I knew the rules because I'd kind of picked those up from church. But anyways, but I did not know where it would lead. And what happened is we got seriously dating, and I'd given her a promise ring, and we were heading towards this engagement. And we were at SEC. Right before we did that, I had this really big crisis hit me. The crisis was this. You have a curse on you. You're destined to destroy anything you touch. That's it. I take it back. I'm probably 20 at that point, but I take it back to Robin. I'm like, hey, you know, we need to take a break. You know, and she doesn't cuss, but she probably wanted to cuss. It's like, what the? She did. She just was so angry at me. And I said, I can't help it. I don't want to ruin your life. I am bad to my core. You are pure and angelic to your core. Do you see how this is not going to work? And she didn't see any of it. She's like, no, you're not. Believe me. Every man knows they're far bigger sinners than any woman on the face of the planet.
Oh, 100%.
Fair enough.
So women have no idea what goes through our mind. Don't make me tell you. But I told Rob, it's like, no, I can't do it. And it was a process of me having, again, coming back to trust God. And that's a big thing. Yeah, I'm trusting God. And I take it to God. And, you know, he verbally makes me a promise. He said, if you stick close to me, you don't have to worry about your marriage.
There you go.
And you'd already heard him say, I'll be your dad. So you had something to point back to. You had a history.
Well, plus years of stupidity and
Right, in between.
obedience and discipline and, yeah, all that too. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so even with relationships, it's all pure. Now, ask a more complicated question, probably well beyond your guys' age. At what point did I feel like I really could lead Robin? That's a good question.
At what point did you feel like you could
You really
lead
lead Robin? In.
I didn't feel like I could lead my wife. When I say that, like, how can I project for her like an incredible path of growth to take advantage of every gift that she has? Only somebody that's tight in a relationship. Guys can do this with each other, but so can married couples. I couldn't do that until I was 40 years old.
Wow.
Because I was always playing catch up to how brilliant she is in her walk with Jesus.
Yeah.
So then would it behoove, I don't want to single anybody out, but would it behoove the single ones then to pay attention now? Because I told you, so he wrote a book a couple years ago
Yeah.
called The Pharisee Factory. And I read the manuscript of it, and I remember telling him, hey, you just saved me at least 5 years of heartache in ministry because of some of the things that he was saying in the book. So I come back to you now saying,
Yeah.
you could potentially save these guys 20 years of marital issues, 20 years of learning.
Mm-hmm.
Is all of this tonight what you're saying led to the point where you felt like you could lead her as a whole person?
Yeah, I mean, probably the biggest thing that changed was probably I know it's out of favor again. It was in, it was out, but I'm an Enneagram 9 at my core, and so I'm just happy being in the background. I don't want to lead anything. I just want to, it's like I just want to help out. And my wife is not. My wife is a leader. Well, how do you lead a leader? That's the first question you can say. Well, how do you lead a leader? Well, you have to be a better leader. Well, I didn't have any drive to be a better leader. I didn't want to be a better leader. And so that is very much even spiritual. And so I had to dig in a lot deeper on doing things that God was asking me to do and being that kind of guy, that maturity part of it, that I just really thought I didn't ever have to get around to doing. And I was just happy not doing it. So I had that experience, and then soon after, about a year later, I'm with Wayne, and all of that begins to happen. I don't know. And I remember I'll tell you the phrase that I remember. I'm totally talking spiritually though, so be careful not to take this any other way. Put yourself in situations where you're in over your head.
And then what do you do when you're there?
Just struggle.
Rely on God and struggle your way through. Yep.
Just struggle. We just use our faith so ineffectively. We just don't. If it's a thing that pleases God, God probably is not all that happy with us, because he's like, why don't you trust me? It's like, because it's awkward, because it's scary, because it doesn't look like I'm going to come out well. Like if I can't win, I don't want to play. I don't know how many of you are like this, but if I can't win, I don't want to play. And it's like, God's like, gosh, you'd really make me happy if you just trusted me. So I leaned into stuff that I would have never leaned into, and that's what caused me to be able to lead my wife.
That's good.
So I dug into things that now. I mean, I began to write a lot, and I began to I began to get into situations that are way over my head.
That's good.
So in spiritual things, I'm not talking about. Well, I did invest in Bitcoin. You guys heard that story. That was wild. I'm not talking about investing in Bitcoin. I'm just saying spiritual things. We just are living so far below. Age doesn't matter in this stuff, you guys. God could and ask you to do things. You're like, well, I'm not doing that. It's like, why?
Yeah.
Why won't you? Age doesn't matter. All the crazy things that happened in the Old Testament, some of these guys were pretty young. Even in the New Testament, those guys were young too. They were, anyways.
That's good.
You guys watch? Do you guys watch The Chosen?
See a few episodes.
So Chosen season 3 episode. I think it's episode 2 or 3. Jesus sits down. This is Jonathan Rami. He's just incredible, an actor. But he sits down. They're all around, and Jesus is like, "All right, this is the time. I'm sending you out 2 by 2." And everybody around the table's like, what? What's, yeah, get out of here. And sure enough, what's his name that produces and directs it?
Yeah. What's the last?
Jenkins? Dallas?
Dallas something. Yeah.
Dallas something?
Yeah.
Anyways, man, he directed this. He just let this hang. This scene just hangs. So there's tension, it's perfect. And it's like, yeah. And then pretty soon the questions start popping, around the table. Excuse me, what are we supposed to say? Oh, you've heard a bunch of my sermons. Use those. Okay. What are we supposed to do? I told you. Cast out demons, heal the sick. I don't think he said raise the dead at this point, but like, and preach the word. Like, okay. And he just sends them out. And their biggest complaint was what? We're not prepared. And Jesus's biggest challenge is, you're over prepared. Get out of here. It was so beautiful. The church needs to understand this. How much preparing do you need? How much do you need to actually obey? People didn't have this book. They believed on the Lord Jesus Christ, his death and resurrection, and they were martyred for that alone. They didn't know anything in here. They didn't even have time. The thief on the cross didn't have time.
No.
It was like, you're over prepared for whatever God is saying, do it. You're over prepared. So, you want to mature?
Prepared, but maybe under exercised.
Yeah. Yeah, we're facing this stuff right now. I'm like, we need to get on making disciples. We need more training. I tell you what, go make a disciple, and then we'll talk about training. Well, how's that work? Well, you don't even know what that feels like. So why don't you try it, and you'll realize, oh my goodness, I depend a lot on God using me to tell my story and to find out what he's doing in somebody else's life. And like, what do you need? Well, you need somebody to take away all your excuses and get out there and have conversations with real people that are lost and broken, and that's what you need. But I need training to do that. Really? I'm pretty sure I can grab any stranger out of any place that you go, and you're going to find somebody that's really hurting. That's your training. I mean, we're over-prepared.
I think in our culture, and I'm not trying to get off topic here, but I think in our culture, we want to live our Christian life incognito. And if there's one thing that I gleaned through the whole COVID process, was we can't live that way.
Yeah.
We've got to be out there.
Yeah.
We've got to be out there.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I cannot tell you the amount of people I have come across. When I was in theater, like that was before COVID, but like even like now or whatever, it's like I'll like hear something and they'll like mention something. I was like, I didn't know you were Christian, but it's like, it's just the whole thing. Like people, it's like oh yeah, I'm Christian, but like you were saying, incognito, more or less, where it's like they say it, but it's like they don't say it. It's not clear, especially like not in the fruits, not in how they're living their life, not in the way they're declaring anything about it. It's just interesting. Like,
well, years ago, they used to say, we have a weak nation because we have weak churches. We have weak churches because we have weak families. We have weak families because we have weak marriages, and we have weak marriages because we have weak men. And it all comes back, and I'm not into this male domination thing, but I think as men of God, we need to be out there. We can't hide our Christianity, and I think what you were saying about what women look for in a man, if you want a good Christian woman, be a good Christian man, and you will attract a good Christian woman. But don't expect to get a good Christian woman if you're a weak spiritual man.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You
True.
get out there and you make disciples. You do what God tells you to do. You will be obedient to Him, and girls will come.
Yeah.
Because that's what women, not girls. That's what women are looking for,
Yeah.
and I think that's where you guys are. You don't want a little girl.
Mm-mm.
You want a woman of God.
Yeah.
Well, if you want a woman of God, then you've got to be a man of God.
Amen.
I've had several jobs in the past, and I've always kind of kept, for the most part, my Christian religion like hush hush. But when I got hired at Target a couple years ago, I kind of adopted the mentality that Paul had with a lot of his ministry, of I am not attached to Target. Target's attached to me. Like Paul in the New Testament was repeatedly untouchable. Like, we're gonna kill you. To die is gain. Leave you alone. To live is Christ. We're gonna throw you in jail. Great, give me a hymnal. I'll convert your guards. We're gonna take you to Caesar. Great, but needed to talk to him about a couple things. Like, you just couldn't touch him. And so I went in with the mentality of Target is attached to me, not I'm attached to them. And so I've been talked to many times about, like, hey, you gotta stop talking about Christianity. Even as recent as a couple weeks
Oh,
ago,
wow.
I got called into the back office by Mike. Like, hey, you gotta stop talking about like Christianity and like Bible stuff and like anything like that. Like, and he said to me this, and it caught me off guard. He said, like, you wouldn't know it, but I'm a Catholic. And I thought, how sad.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That was my immediate thought. Just like, how sad that you supposedly have faith. I don't see the fruit of it.
Yep.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
not a good judge. But
No, Catholics catch-all.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Catholic is like, oh yeah, I went like
When I was a kid.
to mass
Yeah, I
like
was sprinkled as a child.
Easter.
I'm Catholic.
Yeah, he's like, you wouldn't know it, but like I'm Catholic, and
But you don't see me
assuming
doing
he's-
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
assuming that he's telling the truth, my immediate thought is how sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not doing a good job of it.
Mhm.
Yeah, like my mandate before Target, before leading that team well, is Matthew 28. Go and make disciples,
Yeah.
teaching them how to observe, and to the best of my ability, I'm doing it. I mean, who knows how well I'm doing? I'm giving it my best shot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think our job as men, first and foremost, is that.
Mhm.
And I think what you're saying tonight is very much like, hey, men.
Yep.
It's time to be men.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I hear you, but what I'm really saying is, you know, if you don't know, ask.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't know what God wants you to be about or do, and I'm just saying, ask and keep asking until you feel like, you know, you get an answer. You may not like the answer. I'd be happy with that, but God has been consistently and faithful in answering. I love the book of Psalms for two reasons. One, because David mostly, but Psalms is written where you've got these incredibly emotionally honest prayers. They're just like, whew, can't believe this is in the Bible. This sounds a little off color here.
I'm moving my seat a couple
Yeah, it's like
inches
this-
away from it, baby.
Yeah, you read some of the Psalms, especially, you know, I read a lot of stuff in the New Living too, but, you know, King James masked it, but I read it in the New Living, you know, and I'm like, whew, I don't know if that should be in the Bible, you know, but it's this emotionally honest.
Yeah.
And then a friend of mine, Nick Delafou, anyways, Nick tells me, he's like, hey, I've got questions that I don't ask anybody. I'm like, that's fantastic. He goes, yeah, I got questions. I don't know. You know, I don't know if people, you know, give me an answer. And I said, Nick, you are just that's amazing. I think God can handle your questions. Have you asked him? And Nick is the one that taught me we need to bring our best questions that really bother us to God.
Mhm.
And then you talk about God leading, ask the question. So whether your purpose or where you want to do with your life or all the other things that we struggle with, even down to hesitations or questions, I think it's really important to ask. So
Wow.
Good word.
I appreciate
Good words.
Amen.
Anyone else? Are we landing this plane? Awesome. We can go ahead and pray out. One prayer request that I would have, the couple that I live with, Carrie, last week had a stomach ache, made the pithy comment, I feel like there's a rock in my stomach.
Oh.